Jackson, and she's excited to work together.
Yeah.
And
yeah, exactly.
hello and welcome, everybody. It's so good to have you here. This is round number 12 of WBC Talks. Stay home, stay safe. I hope you're having a wonderful time at home, and that's the reason of these talks. Today, we're going to have the round for boxing promoters. It's going to be really, really interesting. Let me introduce first Mauricio Suleiman, president of the WBC.
Hello. It's so nice to see my friends, Carl Moretti, Tom Loeffler, and all those who will be coming into the panel. We're living a movie. This is a movie where we're getting near the end finally. I'm praying everything is fine with your families. This is a boxing family that is united all over the world, and these WBC talks have the intention. Hello, Lou.
Mauricio, how are you, my friend?
How are you?
Look at the fella.
Look at you, Barrett. What's up, my friend?
What's up? How are you?
So basically what we want to do is have some fun, hear from you, fun stories, anecdotes, stupid ideas, get in some fights, and just entertain ourselves and thousands of people watching. Thank you for your time, and I cannot wait to spend the following hour with you guys. Thank you so much.
Thank you, Mauricio. Welcome, Lou. It's good to have you here. I think Eddie is also here, but I cannot see him.
Hold on one second.
Sure, no
One
problem.
second. There you go.
While we connect, I want to watch the video of all of you. Please, can we roll the video?
Cheers, Eddie.
Hey, mate.
Hey, Lou.
Do we have the video ready?
Cheers.
Oh, Jesus.
Wow.
Well, I want to welcome all of you. First, I want to introduce Carl Moretti, Vice President of Top Rank. Welcome, Carl. Lou DiBella, President of DiBella Promotions. Tom Loeffler, President of 360 Promotions. Eddie Hearn, President of Matchroom. I think Eric is here too. president of Golden Boy. Welcome, everybody, and thanks for being with us.
Thank you. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you.
Let me make a quick recommendation. If you can put mute on your microphone when you are not speaking, then all that noise from our own houses will not interfere with the conversations. Did you mention Eddie Hearn, Victor, or not?
Yes, I did.
Oh, okay. Okay. How are you,
I
Eddie?
hope so. I'm very well. I mean, we're. I guess I'm the only Brit on the call. You know, just strange times, worrying times. A little bit of a blessing because I've spent 6 weeks at home, which is probably the first time in about 3 years. I haven't had a flight for 6 weeks. I've been out walking every day. I've been following the WBC walk. Rizzo, you've inspired me to get that walk every day. And we just wait, you know, like the other guys on the call, we wait and we plan. Although, you know, after an amusing phone call last night with Mr. Aaron, which was one of the funniest, and actually people won't mind me, you know, they won't mind the content of this particular conversation leaking out. Where
Not at all.
It was a conference call between myself, Bob Arum, John Wirt, Frank Smith from the office, 𝗧𝗦𝗡𝗗𝗡 talking about the Pulev fight. And it was a phone call requested by John Wirt and 𝗧𝗦𝗡𝗗 about the new date for the Joshua fight. And John Wirt spoke and I spoke and then 𝗧𝗦𝗡𝗗 spoke. And it went on for about 20 minutes. And then eventually it got round to Bob. And Bob says, hey, I really like you guys and I hope everyone's safe. But why are we wasting our time on this phone call? Call me in 2 weeks. You know, and he was like, he said, we're like the blind leading the blind. And it's exactly true. You know, no one really knows, do they? You know, when are we going to return? When's it going to be safe to do so? You know, I mean, I think one of the conversations that will no doubt come up in the call is probably the WWE and the UFC as well, and their virtual insistence to go ahead at this moment, which, you know, I think is a bit strange, but each to their own, and you have to respect the ambition, I guess. But I'm good. You know, our Prime Minister is obviously in intensive care. We're up to, I think it was nearly 700 deaths today in the UK. Worrying times, you know. I think there is the feeling here that we might be approaching the peak, which I guess is something. But yeah, just surprised, Maurizio, to be honest, how quickly the days are going and the weeks. Because I start off on a Monday and I just think, oh God, oh, I've got homeschooling, I've got no fights, I've got like
know what
today,
day it is.
I actually drove to the office today. Our office is closed, but I just drove to the office and just sat in my office, just had a cup of coffee on my own and did a few phone calls. And then I was only there for about 30 minutes and then just drove straight home. But I just needed it for the sanity, you know?
Yeah, it is challenging times, but it all depends on how you handle it. If you allow things that give you anxiety and worriness into your head, then you're going to be suffering all this process. I think we are all in the idea of being busy, staying busy, enjoying home. I mean, how many times did we dream of just being home, not having flights, not having that constant stress that boxing gives you? Well, now we have it. Let's get the best out of it.
Okay, that's enough.
Now we
Move
have
on.
it. Everyone wants boxing back.
Yeah, it's strange to be at home on Saturday. My family look at me like, it's Saturday, you're still here? But, well, I think I want to ask you first, how did you get started in boxing? I want to ask each of you, starting with Carl.
Oh, well, how do I get out of it is maybe the more relevant question. How do I get into it?
You don't, you know that.
I'll make it as quick and try to make it as unboring as possible. I had to do an internship to get my master's in sports administration. And I ended up going to NBC Sports, where I literally was a runner for the NBC Sports football shows in the studio. And then I went to boxing, and I was literally getting cheeseburgers and beers for Ferdy Pacheco and Marv Albert. And and the guy that I worked with at NBC, Steve Griffith and Kevin Monahan, handled boxing, and Steve went to Madison Square Garden in the end of '85, and I was his intern at NBC, and he hired me at $16,500 to be an assistant at Madison Square Garden, doing basically the same type of stuff back in 1986. And my first fight was Hector Camacho and Edwin Rosario with Mike Tyson on the undercard. And I rode down the freight elevator at 9 o'clock at night with Don King and Dick Young from the New York Post. And they went at it like better than the fight was in the ring. And I said, what did I get myself into? and I've been in boxing forever since. And Lou really knows both of those guys real well, Dick Young and Don King. So maybe it's best to turn over to the Harvard grad who was my one-time boss as well, and how he got into boxing.
Lou,
How are you?
good. How did you get started in boxing?
I was a lawyer. I was working at a big law firm in New York, but I always wanted to work in sports. That's why I went to law school. And it was 1989, and I was still in my 20s. And I was interviewing for a job as general counsel of the New York Yankees. Because, as you know, Mauricio, my love other than boxing is baseball. And I own 2 baseball teams, which is a whole other nightmare because
Yeah, right.
50 that I'm going to have a season in either city that I work in. But I was interviewing for the job, general counsel of the Yankees. I made it down to the final 3 people, and I was supposed to go in and meet with George Steinbrenner. And before I left my house, I get a phone call from Steinbrenner's secretary, and she sounds like she's upset. And I'm like, is everything okay? And she's like, well, I don't know how to tell you this, but the boss saw your resume and you're only 28, and he doesn't want to have a general counsel who's 28 years old. So he wanted me to cancel the interview. And I was like, what? And I had taken the day off from my law firm to have the interview. And then she says to me, I don't know if this helps you at all, but the guy that's going to get the job was interviewing to be the lawyer for HBO Sports. So I was like, and the light went off my head. Boxing, HBO, Seth Abraham. I mean, I was a huge boxing fan. So, excuse the puppy playing with the toy in the background.
But it was you.
What I did was, I had my suit on anyway. I put a resume in my pocket. In 1989, it's well before 9/11, so there wasn't big security in the buildings. I snuck past the security guard in the HBO building. I went up to the office of HBO's top lawyer, the general counsel of HBO, and I begged the secretary to get the guy to talk to me. And the guy heard me talking up his secretary for like a half hour, and he finally called me into his office. And I told him, I said, there's no way in the world you're interviewing anybody with a better resume than me, but I can promise you he doesn't know boxing like I know boxing. So he sent me up to Seth Abraham, and Seth and I got along. We talked boxing, we talked baseball for like an hour. That was Friday afternoon, and I got a call the following Monday, and I was offered the job. So it was sort of like strange set of circumstances, but I got the job at HBO Sports thanks to George Steinbrenner not wanting to talk to me.
And you're a Mets season ticket holder.
That's exactly right. I'm not.
Lou, let me show you the book that I have next to my computer.
There we go, my friend. A beautiful game.
Tom, how did you get started in boxing?
Well, it's funny listening to both Carl and Lou talk. They were 2 of the earliest people that I know from boxing. Actually, in 1992, I got involved with a good friend of mine from high school. Actually, I got involved in 91 as a partner in a sports memorabilia firm, Harlan Warner, who was representing a lot of retired athletes.
Great guy, by the way.
Biggest client naturally is Muhammad Ali. We did a lot of work with Muhammad when he was doing appearances and sponsorships and autograph signings. And through his work with Ali, Harlan wanted to get into representing, there you go, the Mets, representing active boxers. And our first fighter that we signed was Kevin Kelly, managing Kevin.
Yeah.
Who was, Carl was at Madison Square Garden boxing back then, and Lou was at HBO. And
Mm-hmm.
That's how I know them from the very beginning, from working with Kevin. And, you know,
that started the little run of guys on HBO with guys that didn't have to be middleweights or less and welterweights. And Kevin really broke through, being the first, you know, because he made, I think it was up in Reno, was the fight against Goyo Vargas.
right.
And we had a horrible heavyweight fight with Michael Mora.
Yep.
And Kevin and Goyo Vargas stole the show. And we got back to New York, and Lou called us at the office and said, when can we get him back on air? And I said, as soon as his 37 cuts heal, we'll get him back on air. You know, and we went from there.
I still have a pencil that Kevin Kelly gave me in 1991.
Yeah, Flush and Flash.
Flush and Flash on it.
Green one. Yeah.
And he said, I'm going to be the first little guy that you put on HBO. And I never forgot that. And he was.
Hence the start of Boxing After Dark.
You know, it's really, Carlo, it's like really sort of underappreciated, but Kevin Kelly helped really open the door for the little men on premium cable.
Absolutely.
Yeah. And it was to Lou's foresight in terms of putting Kevin on. And like Carl said, he got lucky because he would always be the co-feature. He would always be the co-feature to a heavyweight main event. And his fights were always more exciting, whether he fought on Lennox Lewis's undercard or Michael Moore's undercard. He was always, he always stole the show. And that's why, you know, he put on exciting fights. He had the fight, like Carl said, with Goyo Vargas. He had that tremendous fight at the Garden with Naseem Hamed. I mean, Kevin has a very historic career. I think he fought at the Garden 17 times between the Forum, you know, the
and upstairs.
And upstairs. Yeah. So that's how I got started in boxing. And it's been a great run ever since then through, you know, managing fighters. And I met the Klitschko's, and then we started K2 Promotions. Patelli knocked out the guy I was managing, Carl Ed Mahone. He knocked him out, and then he wasn't happy with his German promoter at the time. We started K2 Promotions, and then with K2 signed Triple G, and it was kind of went on from there. But what Lou said, as far as or Carl said, Kevin, I think was, and Lou might know better, was the first featherweight on HBO since Salvador Sanchez. So, you know, it was a tribute to bringing the small guys into the ring. And then we went even smaller than that with 𝗥𝗢𝗨𝗡𝗗 at some point being the co-feature.
Hey, John, guess how you get started, not the whole story.
And that was it. That's how I started.
Yeah, but Lou and I are the only ones without any hair, and you still have a full head of hair. So I don't know how that worked out.
You've been doing it longer than I have.
Yeah, I guess not that much.
I want to ask, I'm not sure if it's Eric Gomez or Eric Gomez's son. He doesn't have any mustache anymore.
Hey, guys. Yeah, just keeping from going crazy. But I'm happy to see all of you guys are healthy, first of all. You know, it's crazy times. I can echo a lot of the sentiments that Eddie Hearn was talking about. But it is fortunate though, and we have to enjoy our families and kids, whoever has kids or pets, being home, and to be asked to be home and do nothing is incredible. It's incredible. It's just, you know, something you can't imagine. But anyway, I started in boxing. Many of you guys know my story. I grew up with Oscar. Oscar and I, we met in kindergarten and grew up together. And he first hired me when I was about 21, 22 years old to run his foundation. He had a foundation. We had an after-school kids program for kids. We helped them with tutoring. You know, and we also had a boxing program with the amateurs, and did that for about 5 years. We did that, and I was the director for the youth center, worked with amateurs. A lot of really good fighters went through our system. We had about 4 kids that made the Olympic team. We're Olympians. Very proud of that. And then Oscar, right when it was right around the time when he was in his prime, right around 1999, 2000, he wanted to get in the business of boxing, and we started with a management company. And we were very fortunate to be working with Lou DiBella, who actually promoted some of our fighters when we were managing fighters. And after a couple of years of that, we realized that babysitting fighters is not a
Not a lot has changed.
babysitting fighters by managing them, you have to babysit them a little more than
Eric,
promoting
I'm not so sure
was
it's
not very
better
profitable. Yeah.
I'm not so sure that management's not the better business right now.
Yeah, right,
Yeah,
right,
yeah,
right.
You're right. Yeah, you're probably right with that. Yeah. But shortly after we started Golden Boy Promotions right around 2002 and been fortunate enough to work with a lot of you guys. I had for as young as I am, I believe I'm the youngest on this call. Had a very good relationship with Mauricio's father, Don Jose, and he really gave me a lot of really good advice and kind of looked out for me. And I always cherish that and appreciate that because I was just a young kid. I was Oscar's friend. That's what I was known as. And for Don Jose to, really take me under his wing in many ways and kind of give me advice and call me and check on me. And I would call him and talk to him about fights and about ratings and how to move guys up the ratings and all that. That was very, something that I cherish a lot. And I appreciate that your dad did that, Mauricio, for such a young guy that I was and to do that. But, obviously it had to do with him, his relationship with Oscar, and he really loved Oscar and looked after Oscar when he was in his prime. And many of you guys, Lou looked after Oscar when he was at HBO. So I thank you guys for that.
And who was the bully, Eric? Oscar or you at the school?
No, you know what? The funny thing is, Oscar wasn't, he would always say the same thing. He wasn't a bully or, he never really got into fights. He was a good kid, but he would always say the same thing. He would say, you know what? I don't fight for free. I don't fight for free. So, he wasn't a bully. We weren't bullies.
Eric, you mentioned that we worked together early on. One thing that getting holed up in your house with nothing to do for weeks causes you to do is a lot of thinking,
Yeah.
And, I when I first got out of HBO, it was not on the greatest terms. I started a company. I was out there alone for the first time. I didn't even intend originally to be a boxing promoter, and I wound up sort of falling into it, though it sort of made sense. But you guys, Oscar actually, early on when I first left HBO, was very kind to me, and I promoted a couple of shows with you guys,
Yeah.
And I haven't forgotten that. And actually, the last couple of weeks, I've thought more about that. And my relationship with Oscar has gotten rocky over the years. But one of the things and I mean this, I really want to do now is get on the phone and say hello. Because sitting around and reflecting on my career, there was a time that Oscar was very kind to me, and I've never forgotten that. Not to mention, he's one of the greatest fighters I ever worked with in my life.
Yeah, thank you. I'll let him know that, Lou. Thank you.
Lou, did you do his multi-fight at HBO?
Oh, yeah. Well, I mean, I did everybody's multi-fight.
That's
when
true.
you really look at the 90s were the first era of multi-fight agreements really at HBO that were that significant. And when we had one after another, Lennox Lewis, Riddick Bowe, Evander Holyfield, Oscar De La Hoya, Floyd Mayweather. I did all of those. I did all of their initial long-term agreements.
Thank you, Lou. Eddie, would you tell us how you got in boxing?
Well, firstly, I want to say, Eric, how old are you?
I'm 46.
Right. Well, don't do me like that. I'm 41 this year. I'm 41. I might look a bit older, but
okay.
So I was kind of like I was kind of born in it, but not quite. Matchroom started promoting boxing in 1987, and I was 8 years old at the time. And once I got to like 9 or 10, my dad, as many of you know, my dad on this call, particularly, I know probably the best, I would say, Lou DiBella, knows him better than anyone on this call, but obviously he knows Carl and Maurizio, who's very close with your dad as well, and he basically, my dad's like the kind of guy where he's a bit of a chancer, I think is a good way to explain it. And he basically found a way to, in virtually his second ever promotion in boxing, promote Frank Bruno against Joe Bugner at White Hart Lane at Tottenham Hotspur's stadium at the time. I was 9 years old, and he just basically, he's probably that guy that we would have all hated at the time, because he found a way, not having either fighter under contract, to basically put that fight together virtually without either promoter really knowing about it until everything was signed and agreed. So that landed on ITV in the UK, and then from there, you know, he had a very famous run of fights, obviously in the UK with 𝗧𝗔𝗟𝗡𝗗. Sorry, my dog's getting mad here. 𝗧𝗔𝗟𝗡𝗗, Lennox Lewis, Chris Eubank, of course, and the two great fights with Nigel Benn. And I kind of like grew up in the gym, in the Matchroom gym, which was the home of, you know, Eubank and Bruno and, you know, all these world champions at the time. Jim McDonnell, who was a super featherweight and lightweight, who was like a hero of mine, fought Azuma Nelson at Royal Albert Hall when I was probably like 9 or 10. And I was just like basically 9, 10, 11 years of age, just living at school and then going to the gym after. I'd go to every single show. I would read the British Boxing Yearbook, which was basically like Box Rec, and I would know the records of every single fighter in the UK. You know, it doesn't matter if they were a journeyman or one of our prospects, and I was obsessed with it, probably from the ages of 8 or 9 till maybe 15. And I followed him all over the world. I mean, Carl, we remember the infamous fight in Hong Kong, you know, where Herbie Hyde, our heavyweight world champion, was fighting Tommy Morrison for the WBO world title. And basically we all flew out there, the family flew out there, and my dad had to call the fight off at the weigh-in because the Hong Kong friends never came up with the money.
Shocking.
And I was sort of like, I just remember very, very vaguely. I mean, I'm guessing, Carl, that was probably like 1990 or something like that. And I just remember like my dad screaming and shouting, and Bob as well screaming and shouting, and we just had to go home. You know, we went home the next day, you know, but I followed him on the road everywhere. It didn't matter if it was Naz fighting, you know, Barrera in Vegas, if it was, Johnny Nelson going over and fighting Marcus Bott in Germany, if it was going to Hong Kong for that fight, if it was going to South Africa for Eubank. You know, I basically, the only time I got to spend with him was when he was around boxing. So I would just follow him everywhere. When I left college, I went to work for a sports management company, and I started to represent golfers on the PGA Tour and the European Tour, and followed the tours around for about 5 or 6 years, really as a sports agent, really, you know, day-to-day stuff, sponsorship, legal contracts, stuff like that. And then after that, I noticed the boom in online gaming, and I started to create probably about 80 or 90% of the worldwide online poker TV tournaments, which is quite bizarre, but it was a big moment for our business because we started to really take off from there, and we made a lot of money dealing with all the online gaming sites, creating televised concepts for them for poker. And that was when we were also doing Prize Fighter at the time. So Sky had 4 promoters. It was Matchroom, Frank Warren, Ricky Hatton, and Frank Maloney, Kelly Maloney now. And I basically met Audley Harrison at a poker tournament, the World Series of Poker. And Matchroom were just doing like 6 or 7 shows a year for Sky. But my dad had no fighters. He completely fell out of love with it. He was just kind of doing it as a favour to a few managers that had fighters. And I met Audley Harrison, and we had this series called Prize Fighter at the time, which was really successful. And I met this guy, Audley Harrison, who was Olympic gold medalist and 6'6", and looked and spoke so wonderfully well. And I had a few drinks, and I told him that he should come with me. I would sign him. He would win Prize Fighter. I could get him Michael Sprott for the European title, and then I'll get him the David Haye fight. And he looked at me like I was mad. I didn't know what I was talking about, but it sounded like a great idea at the time. And he phoned me the next day and he said, let's do it. So I phoned my dad. I said, look, great news. I've met Audley Harrison, you know, Olympic gold medalist. And he said, Audley Harrison? He said, I'm not going anywhere near Audley Harrison. He said, you're on your own. Because he was everything that my dad kind of despised about the way the industry was going, which was fighters wanting to be promoters. And, you know, and that was at a stage where he was prepared to walk away from boxing because he thought he didn't like the way it was going. And Audley was the guy who sort of championed the fact that he was the guy who was signing the TV contracts and they were his shows. And I just said, he said, look, you're on your own. If you want to do it, go for it. But anyway, he went into prize fighter. He won it. He went in against Michael Sprott for the European title. He lost every round, and he knocked Michael Sprott out with 15 seconds to go in the 12th round. And then somehow I blagged the world title fight against David Haye. It was on Sky pay-per-view. It was at Manchester Arena in front of 20,000. And I just, very similar to now, I just ran with my mouth. You know, I was even more obnoxious then. I was like, I was 30. And I was just interviews and this and that. And I really thought Audley Harrison was going to win. And we went out. He looked brilliant. He spoke so well in camp. I mean, he did so many pay-per-view buys. I sold the high legs off it. And he didn't throw a punch, basically. And after 3 rounds, he just got stopped and knocked out. He got booed out of the arena and abused. I got shouted at for 3 or 4 weeks. And I just said to myself that night when I left the arena, I'm done in boxing. It was great. I mean, I can't believe I've blagged it to this level. But then the phone started ringing. First Darren Barker, then Kell Brook, then Carl Froch, over like a 2-week period. And they all just said, if you can do that for Audley Harrison, surely you can do that for me. You know, and I started, boxing was on its knees in the UK. And it was in small hall arenas. No one was trying. And I just took a run at it with big fights and big shows. Kell Brook fighting Matthew Hatton. We did Carl Froch against Lucien Butte. And all of a sudden, they were selling out 8,000-9,000 arenas. The ratings on Sky were huge. And I told Sky, you've got to go exclusively with us. I said, you've got 4 promoters that are all working against each other, and we're all supposed to be working for the benefit of the same network. It's ridiculous. It took a while, but we got it eventually. And that was 7 or 8 years ago. And here we are today.
Thank you, Eddie. I want to ask you, which is your favorite fighter of all times? Who wants to answer first?
I'll jump. I think Carl and I may have the same answer on this one.
Yeah, and I'll show you an illustration if you can see it behind me. Thanks to you. Can you see him up there?
Mm-hmm.
The poster.
Nice
The
poster,
Gaddy
Carl.
War, from Ring Magazine, and then I got a couple of others of them here, and you know, there's no question that Gaddy's my favorite fighter. You know,
Gaddy's my favorite fighter, and actually, it's an interesting story. Dan Duva called me, the late Dan Duva, early '90s, and he wanted me to go to this little show in Totowa, New Jersey. I think it was at the Ice Palace. Was that the name of the place?
Ice World.
Ice World. It was like a ice skating place, basically.
Mm-hmm.
And he wanted me to go there to watch a couple of other fighters. And there was a show, and I think the guy's name that Arturo fought was King Solomon or something like that.
Well, that was in Philly, and Russell got him beat and put him in King Solomon.
Right.
Yeah,
and it wasn't King Solomon, but this was in New Jersey.
It was right.
Somebody. I went at Dan's request to look at these couple of other fighters,
Mm-hmm.
and Gaddy kid comes on, and he's like this good-looking little Italian kid, and he's throwing a gazillion punches. Everything the other guy's throwing is hitting him, and the more he gets hit, the more he keeps coming. And I walked, like, at the end of the night when Dan said, so what do you think of so-and-so? I said, I don't know about so-and-so, but I want to put Arturo Gatti on television.
Mm-hmm.
And that's how the Gatti HBO relationship began.
Yeah.
And, you know, and also with Arthur, it got personal. It wasn't just boxing. He became a friend, you know, like almost like a family.
Right.
And,
So Lou and Carl Gatti. How about you, Tom?
Well, you're going to put me in a tough spot, Mauricio. You know, I have a very close relationship with Vitaly. You know, what we accomplished with him, and he's the mayor of Kiev now. And Kevin Kelly, the first fighter I ever worked with, I have a very close relationship with him. By the way, just to interject, Kevin lost his father last week in New York and for the coronavirus. So we want to send our best regards to Kevin and his family.
Yeah, what that note, being in New York right now, it really is sort of crazy here right now. And in the last 36 hours, I mean, I thank God that I haven't lost a family member or a close friend. But 7 people I care about have lost a family member or a close friend, and 7 calls in literally the last 36 hours. You know, and you know, one of them, my fighter Tiara Brown, lost her aunt. Boyd Melson's mom is in the hospital right now. You know, I've gotten literally 7 calls in 36 hours. People. It's starting to affect everybody here, and it's
that's why we're here right now, to find a window out of that crazy world. So let's enjoy, let's share stories and continue with it. So
Yeah, and prayers up to everybody going through. You know, we're not by doing this. You know, we all need to live. You know, but we're thinking about you and we're with you, and they should know that.
Yeah, it really hits home, Lou, when you know somebody who's been affected by it. You know, so Kevin's really the first person that I know personally whose family has been affected by it. So again, our thoughts and prayers go out to him. And to go back to the question, you know, I gotta, you know, what we accomplished with Triple G is, you know, I'm really proud of that. So I would go with Triple G on the favorite fighter side.
What about you, Eric?
You know, it's funny because the guy that I really followed growing up and that I really liked and enjoyed watching and really got my attention for boxing was Marvin Hagler when I was growing up.
Yeah.
Obviously the fight with Tommy Hearns, and I mean, you know, he was a big name back in the 80s. That's the guy that I really followed. But I have been fortunate now in boxing to have worked with a lot of great fighters. And you know, it's hard to really pick one.
Eric, you better say Oscar.
I was gonna say, when does Oscar's name come up in this?
Oscar's like a brother. Oscar's like a brother. We're related. You know, he's in many ways
I'm
he's
gonna
like my
help
brother.
you. I'm gonna help you. You cannot choose Oscar.
But you know, but you know, being Mexican American, I mean, you got to go with Chavez. I mean, Chavez is the guy that really, you know, just inspired a whole nation, a whole country, and two countries actually, because a lot of the Mexicans that live here in the U.S. Really enjoyed what he did, and he did things that were unprecedented and amazing, and just, you know, it would have to be him.
What about you, Eddie?
Well, it's funny you should say Chavez, because one of my favourite fighters got beat by Chavez in a heartbreaking ending, which is Meldrick Taylor. I don't know why, but for some reason, when I was growing up and just following boxing, Meldrick Taylor was one of the guys that I really loved to watch. And a lot of the people on this call will know a lot more about Meldrick Taylor than I do. But, you know, around that time, Pernell Whitaker as well, you know, was a guy, and I was sort of growing up off the back end of the Haglers and, you know, those kind of guys. But for me, yeah, I liked Pernell Whitaker and Meldrick Taylor.
I'm wearing a T-shirt right now. You can't read it, but it says, "Always be yourself, but if you could be Pernell Whitaker, always be Pernell Whitaker."
That's great.
Give it to me as a gift by somebody. But, you know, I was at that fight with Meldrick Taylor and Chavez, and I remember the second that the fight was stopped, I turned to the person next to me and I said, "We're heading out right now." And before literally anyone had time to digest it, I did a 40-yard dash away from the ring because things got hairy. I mean, that was
What year was that, Lou?
You know, I don't even remember. Early 90s.
91.
It was 90, 91, yeah.
91.
91.
At the Hilton in Las Vegas.
I'll never forget that. My God.
Yeah, because I had McGirt at the time, and McGirt lost to Meldrick, and really it was the winner of McGirt-Meldrick was going to fight Chavez next for the unified 140-pound title. And I was with McGirt at the time, even though we were all under the main events umbrella, and they ended up making Meldrick and Chavez in one of the greatest fights ever.
Now, I would like to ask you, which was the best fight of all times for you, Carl?
In person?
Yeah. Choose one.
That's a tough one.
Yeah. In the ring or out of the ring? Because that would be both.
You can choose.
You know, there's just so many. You know, I mean,
In person or just your favorite fight? What would you like?
I would say let's go both ways. I mean,
you know, the ones that I wasn't at that I'd love to see, Lou can certainly speak to this, is, you know, those historical fights like Ali and Liston, and when he beat him in Miami, I could just imagine what that was like in the 60s. You know, the middleweight fights with Ray Robinson and all those fights from the 50s is just something you just wish, when there was crowds of 40,000 people, you know, and television came in at the end and television didn't dictate anything. You know, nowadays it's, you know, you just respect so many fights like the Gaddy fights and 𝗥𝗢𝗨𝗡𝗗 and the Holyfield-Bowe fight. You know, the first one was unbelievable. I was, you know, at that one. So it's, the list just goes on and on, you know.
What about you, Eric?
The one I wasn't part of it. I wasn't there, but it's, you know, my favorite fight, and I've watched it so many times. I like to go back and watch it. Is 𝗥𝗢𝗨𝗡𝗗. 𝗥𝗢𝗨𝗡𝗗 won. That was just, I mean, that was an incredible fight. I mean, those guys went at it, and just a beautiful fight. And live that I was a part of, there's so many, but you know, I guess Canelo Golovkin too comes to mind because it's recent, but that was a real good fight. The Pacquiao Marquez fights, we actually promoted the second fight with Top Rank. You know, so many.
Tom?
Well, I'll start out by saying Canelo Golovkin 2 was a great fight. Eric and I still disagree on who won that fight, but for me, I have a top three for you. Two I was involved with. One, I was there as a fan. 𝗥𝗢𝗨𝗡𝗗 was tremendous at the Garden. 𝗥𝗢𝗨𝗡𝗗 Lennox Lewis at Staples Center was a tremendous heavyweight fight. And then I got to agree with Eric with I was there in person at Diego Corrales against Castillo. I actually knew Diego personally, and you know, sorry for his loss, but that they put on such a tremendous war that was really stand out for me.
What about you, Eddie?
Well, two fights that I were at that stand out. I think Tom was at one of them actually, which was Joshua against Klitschko.
Yeah.
At Wembley Stadium.
That was great.
Just one guy who was a legend of the heavyweight division, another kind of like rookie really, who dived in. Just a great sort of clash of eras, if you like. And it was just the most thrilling fight. Both guys down in the fight, and Joshua come back to stop him. But bit of a left field one, but I think it's suitable for this phone call, is a WBC world title fight between Michael Brody and 𝗥𝗢𝗨𝗡𝗗 that I was at in Manchester at the GMEX Centre, probably like early 90s. I don't know if you remember, Maurizio, but this is like another part of growing up where I just remember being around my dad shouting, going absolutely mad, and everybody else shouting and pushing and nearly getting into fights, which was one of the best fights I've ever seen, Brody against 𝗥𝗢𝗨𝗡𝗗. And they gave the fight to 𝗥𝗢𝗨𝗡𝗗, and Brody should have won the fight. And then when they got back to the changing rooms, my dad asked to see the scorecards, added them up, and it was a draw. The supervisor had miscounted one of the cards. You remember, Maurizio? And then we had to announce that the fight was actually a draw, and there was a rematch in which 𝗥𝗢𝗨𝗡𝗗 won by stoppage. But it like the whole fight was just incredible, and you know, there was nearly a riot in Manchester when they gave it to 𝗥𝗢𝗨𝗡𝗗, and then they reversed the scorecards for a draw shortly after.
Lou?
Probably because I promoted Mickey Ward, who's still one of my dear friends, and Arturo was my favorite fighter, and I had an incredibly close relationship with him. There was so much personally involved for me with Gaddy Ward 1, and then for Mickey to have won the fight, and then going to the emergency room with the two of them and drinking beers, when they like watching them like almost become like blood brothers, like I mean,
Literally,
those guys were like best friends. I mean, they loved each other. I mean, you know, loved each other, and I'll never forget. And Carlo, you were there, I think, in the emergency room that night. Cracking beers in an emergency room with two guys who were about to get CAT scans because they beat themselves to a bloody pulp.
Right.
And they're sitting there drinking together and just like bonding. It was cool. I also have to mention the Hamed fight with Kevin Kelly, because I was a young HBO executive. Well, I was in the middle of my career, but I sort of bet my whole career on Hamed. I mean, we spent a fortune on Hamed at HBO. And it was
well aware.
it was me going to Seth, and then Seth and I going to the people above. You know, Michael Fuchs said at HBO at the time and saying like, we need this kid. It can be a superstar. And that night, if you remember, when he danced into the ring, it took 20 minutes to do it.
Yeah.
Like, it was crazy because that whole arena, no one knew who he was really. They just saw his posters everywhere. But the whole arena was dancing with him. And it was, I mean, and then they were both down within the first minute and a half of the fight.
Yeah.
It was, I'll never forget that night.
Lou, what about all his brothers, 𝗧𝗔𝗟𝗞𝗦, who, you know, when we talk about, I said about my dad falling out of love with the sport, it was like, I never forget that I came into the office, they were all sitting around his table, right? And they had like 6 or 7 brothers. And it was like, this is so-and-so, he's in charge of the music. This is so-and-so, he's in charge of my ring walk outfit. This is so-and-so, he runs the security.
He's the
And
assistant to the guy who's in charge of the ring walk.
Yeah,
outfit.
I know, yeah.
Right.
The funny part was that kid was such an operation that maybe he needed all of them.
He was,
yeah. Do you remember the ring? Anyone remember the ring walk when he did Thriller on Halloween and he danced into the ring with in the cemetery with the lights and the fog? I mean, it was. He changed boxing forever, Hamed. I really do think that.
And on the magic carpet as well, the flying carpet.
Yeah.
And then when he fought Barrera, he came out on the ring in the, you know, like the 𝗥𝗢𝗨𝗡𝗗 ring, didn't he? You know, coming down.
Yeah. Actually, 𝗥𝗢𝗨 has a big column on Hamed coming out today on ESPN.com, just, you know, praising him as he was ahead of the generations. Now, imagine Hamed on Twitter or Facebook or Instagram if they had it back then, but it'll be out later today. It's the first page on ESPN.com. Wait till you read it. It's great.
You know, when Hamed was going down in that against Barrera, the Mexicans started throwing beer at him.
Yes. You hope it was beer.
Oh, he got absolutely schooled that night. And of course, the famous story about Naz in La Quinta in Palm Springs, you know, pointing up to the mountain saying, "Can you believe that idiot's up there training?" You know, about Barrera. Look at
you know what? I remember that, Eddie, because I saw that coming. A lot of people saw that coming that night. I mean, that was the strangest. Like, I've never seen a fighter. You know, Naz was pretty dedicated when he trained for a fight normally. But that particular fight, it was like, I don't know what happened, but he was like partying like a rock star. He was living the life of luxury. And Barrera was just getting prepared to beat the hell out of him. And I never thought Naseem was prepared for that fight mentally or physically. And if you remember, too, the fight was delayed, like getting into the ring. Like, the whole night was weird.
The whole promotion was a mess. You know?
You could see it coming. You knew, like, I just knew that was coming. And he got schooled. 100% right.
Right. I think you had to come up with Cedric's license to put it in Vegas to get the show on or something. It was just, you know, it was a disaster from the get-go.
From the get-go. Lou, I remember looking at you when Kevin dropped him early, like you said. I think he dropped him twice first, and you were like kind of in shock.
How dare, that's not in the contract.
Big deal, yeah.
By the way, at that point in time, I still had a head of hair. It's probably why I no longer have one.
Right. Well, didn't Junior Jones fight in the opener too?
Yeah,
that night?
Junior
against not against McKinney, against the kid out of Vegas.
Was it Wilfredo? No.
Lou, who was it? You did it. It was.
I don't remember, but I can tell you something. Nobody was more victimized by the fights he fought underneath than Junior Jones. Number 2, one of the greatest fights I ever saw in terms of drama was Arturo Gatti against Wilson Rodriguez.
Yeah, and he fought 𝗥𝗢𝗨𝗡𝗗. Remember?
He couldn't see, and he faked out the referee by, you know, he
the doctor.
covered the wrong eye. The referee told him to cover the eye that was messed up. He covered the messed up, looked at the good eye, and they let.
We said, "You're fine. Yeah, you're fine. Go ahead, keep going."
And the referee said, "You have one more round," and that round he knocked out Rodriguez. But
right.
Forget the opening fight was Junior Jones against Hall of Famer Orlando Canizales in one of the great fights that people forget about.
Yeah.
Sorry, but here's the puppy. One of the great fights that people forget about. And Junior had this habit of being support for like some of the greatest fights of our generations.
Yeah.
Yeah. It was Kennedy McKinney, by the way. Thanks to a friend.
That's right.
Yeah.
Let me tell you, there is people watching from Belgium, France, Costa Rica, Panama, USA, Mexico, Portugal, UK, Germany, and Argentina. This Joe Gallagher, Jill Diamond, Richard Hassan, Lupe Garcia, Eddie Montalvo, Bernie says hi to everybody, and Hector Islas Jr. I want to ask you for the weirdest thing that ever happened in a promotion or in a fight, which is the strangest thing. Carl.
Why am I always first?
So
you
you
know,
remember something?
I tell you, I won't bring up the 𝗥𝗢𝗨𝗡 riot because that's a show unto itself. But one of the first fights I went to was in Mexico, and it was Miguel Angel Gonzalez, the lightweight champion. And we did it in a bull ring, and we showed it back to the United States, I think on CBS. And it was my first trip to Mexico. And after the fight, there was a walkout fight or 2 undercard fights that were terrific. And the out-of-towner, which means non-Mexican, got the decision. And here come the cups and the booze and everything like that. And I forgot who grabbed me. It might have been Jimmy Montoya, and he said, "Just get under the ring, and before you get hurt." And I dove under the ring while the stuff was being doused and everything. I said, "Oh, can you believe this? I got all this beer on my shirt and pants and everything." And he said, "What makes you think it's beer?" and then he told me the story of what Mexicans in the bull ring do when they're, I guess, too relaxed to get up and go to the bathroom. So that was an inauguration back in 1986 on fights in bull rings in Mexico. So that's one for you.
What's one of the strangest things that's happened?
Yes.
It seems like every single fight there's something.
Right. Yeah. Which week?
Every single show. I gotta say, okay. So one of them that happened to me, it happened early on. Was it's a fight I had made here in California, 10-round fight. I don't remember the names, but it was an upset, and it was this kid from Mexico upset one of our prospects, and it was a close fight. And I remember they both got tested, and the kid that got beat, the prospect, was telling me, he said, "Hey, let's make sure that he comes back clean from his test, because this guy, he was very strong. He was very, very strong, very different than I remember him, and very different than his videos." And I remember getting the call from Dean Lohais at the time. Here he was here in California, working with the commission. Dean Lohais calls me and he says, "Eric, we got the test results back." And I said, "Okay, is everything okay? Is the kid clean? Because there's some rumors that he might have been doing something." And he says, "It's funny because I got the same rumors, and he did come back clean, but there's a problem." And I said, "Okay, what's the problem?" "He's pregnant." And so I guess his girlfriend at the time, I don't know how they did it, but she's the one that gave
I want to hear this
sample.
one, right?
She's the one that gave the sample. And,
Okay.
All right. The guy was pregnant.
I think Mauricio had a really good one like that.
Yes.
Remember in Paris?
What's that?
Mauricio?
Yeah, one of the first anti-doping tests when the WBC started in the early 70s. We started the anti-doping process, and so my father is the supervisor for Monzon against Nápoles. Fight is over, goes to Monzon dressing room, bangs on the door, and he says, "Give me your urine sample." He says, "Impossible, I cannot urinate. I'm dehydrated and I don't want to do it." "You have to do it or we'll take your time," blah, 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 blah. They argue. 30 minutes later, he gives my father a cup. But at those times, he just handed the cup to the supervisor and then to the lab. There were no fax, no email, nothing at that time. So a month later, he gets a letter from France, and he opens up the letter. It's the results from Monzon, and the urine sample tested for champagne.
Eddie, what was the strangest thing ever happened to you?
Well, one of the most disappointing things that rolled into just a wild experience was probably the 𝗧𝗟𝗡𝗗 failed drugs tests on the Anthony Joshua fight for the Madison Square Garden fight, because, you know, we went. It was the first time I've seen AJ lose his temper in a build-up. It was electric. We'd virtually sold out the Garden. It was his American debut. And then it was that moment where you get a phone call from Margaret to say, got some bad news, I'm afraid.
Well,
like,
when she's calling, it's bad news.
I know. So I'm like,
Right.
𝗧𝗟𝗡𝗗's failed a drugs test. And I'm like, oh, God. And it's just that moment 5 weeks out, you know, where it's just, or less. And it's just a case of, like, what? And then when you get one the day after to say, oh, by the way, and he also failed the one after that. And, oh, what, for the same thing? No, for something completely different. And then 3 days later, another one for something completely different as well. But I'd have to say that actually one of the most wildest and bizarre nights was probably the 𝗥𝗢𝗨𝗡𝗗 fight recently, because, like, obviously with everything that went on with him and getting into the fight, and then when he comes in and he weighs in heavy for the fight, and I'm just thinking, this is just like, and then he does really well for the first few rounds, and then he just basically just turns his back and quits. When you were talking about the ball ring, I mean, this must have been a similar size. Well, I must have had, I reckon I had 30 or 40 pints land straight and clean on me during that period. So back, and actually of my dad's stories going up, this is probably one that you guys would know more about in terms of the fighter himself. He once brought a fighter over to fight his welterweight world WBO champion, which was Eamon Loughran. And the guy's name was Tony the Tiger Lopez, right?
From Sacramento.
And, yes. And
God,
my
Target.
dad believed this guy was actually one of the most talented fighters he's ever worked with. And he went on, and I think he drew with like Quarty, didn't he, or something like that. And he basically asked my dad for an advance, and my dad gave him an advance, and I think he disappeared into the mountains of Sacramento.
No, that was Jose Luis Lopez.
Yes, sorry, Jose.
Jose.
No, Tony, the Tiger.
Was it Tony, the 30-pounder from Sacramento?
From Sacramento, yeah. Eventually, he just disappeared into the mountains for some of that green stuff, and I don't think he was ever came back. We brought him over as an opponent, and he knocked out Eamon Loughran in the first round. He could really fight, that kid.
Thank you, Eddie. Eric, we were talking with your little daughter. If you can put it on, it would be better, because she was telling something really interesting.
I'm sorry.
No, no problem. Dude, what is the strangest thing ever happened to you?
Well, first, I had like 13 or 14 years that I was at every fight every promoter in the world did. So I've seen every wacko thing known to man. But I'm going to throw one out just because it's so different. Remember Fan Man?
Oh, God.
Fan Man?
Oh.
I was sitting in the second row. It was outdoors, Caesar's Palace. It was Bo Holyfield, right?
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, it was
Bo Holyfield too.
Yeah, Bo Holyfield too.
Yeah, that was two. That was two.
And I don't know why, but I was sort of like letting my eyes wander, and I heard this weird little buzzing noise, and I look up, and I think it's like like someone has a toy plane or helicopter or something. And I didn't even know at that point in time, toy helicopters and planes weren't all over the place. And then I see like it starts getting closer, and it looks like a dude with a gigantic fan on his back. and all of a sudden he's out of my view. And the next thing I know, I feel like a foot touching the top of my head, and he comes into the ring. And like for a brief moment, you didn't know what was going to happen. Like, was a bomb going to explode?
Imagine that nowadays. Forget it.
Oh my God! People would have a heart. That was so well before 9/11. It was before we were used to these acts of terrorism, all this crazy stuff. But I'll never forget it, because like literally I could feel this, like his foot blew up, and I see land and stop in to the ring with a fan on his back.
Yeah.
I was hey Lou, I was at that fight. I was at that fight, and I remember the guy flew by like once or twice before he actually went in the ring.
He was surveying the situation.
He did a couple of The other crazy one was Sergio Martinez fighting for the first time as champion in Argentina. the Argentinian, like the
Oh,
guys,
the ring.
60,000 tickets sold out stadium. And all of a sudden,
Right.
hurricane warnings and gale
Ah.
warnings. And
Mhm.
at
He
one
lost the
point,
fight, and he lost the fight.
He got knocked down twice.
That was a strange night.
I want to give my honest opinion on that one. First of all, like, absolutely, Martin Murray has an argument that was a super close fight. I actually think Murray let the fight get away from him in the last couple of rounds. But in a weird way, I will.
We're losing you.
Because Sergio he slipped the ring, the corners and the areas near the ropes.
Lou,
He
go back.
slipped and he was
Go
injured.
back inside
Artie
because
Palula,
we're losing the Wi-Fi.
Artie Palula trying to call me right now. Sergio slipped and hurt his leg early in the fight. So I thought it was sort of amazing that he gutted it out and actually won, I thought, the last couple of rounds to make it close enough where he got the decision. To this day, Martin Murray always reaches out to me and says, I won that fight. And honestly, that fight could have gone either way. It was a sensational fight. He wasn't going to get the win in a fight that close in a typhoon in Argentina in front of 50,000 people.
No, that wasn't happening.
But by the way, had he put his foot on the pedal a little bit more in 11 and 12, he would have gotten the decision.
I don't know about that.
Do you remember in the 70s, there was this guy that would show up in all the major events that had a wig with different colors?
Yeah, at the baseball games too.
Yeah.
Baseball
He'd
game.
sit behind home plate and stuff like that.
He was at the Duran Leonard. You
Yeah.
know, used to go.
He was at all the Super Bowls and the World Series too.
Yeah. Mm-hmm.
What about you, Tom?
I got three. I would say three Vladimir Klitschko fights. Both involved David Haye. First one was scheduled. We had it announced for a 60,000 seat soccer stadium in Germany at Schalke, and then Haye had to pull out of the fight. Literally, I think it was either 10 days before. I forgot what David had, but anyway, he had to pull out of the fight. And then how do you find a replacement opponent? This is exactly what Eddie went through, except a lot shorter time frame. How do you find a replacement opponent for a heavyweight championship at a large soccer stadium that was already sold out in Germany? And what happened was 𝗥𝗢𝗨𝗡𝗗 was supposed to fight Robert Helenius, and somehow his test for hepatitis, they said it didn't pass for Helenius up in Sweden, but the German commission, there was a certain threshold that said, okay, you might have hepatitis strains, but you're not contagious. And so the German commission actually approved 𝗥𝗢𝗨𝗡𝗗, who had been training for a Helenius fight on the same day. And then, so within a week, we switched the David Haye with 𝗥𝗢𝗨𝗡𝗗. And then when the David Haye fight actually did happen in Hamburg, you figure it's the middle of July. It's the first time I remember Bernd was doing the deals with the soccer stadiums, and he said, we'll never put a Klitschko fight in an open soccer stadium. It always has to have a closed roof on it. And so sure enough, we went to Hamburg, open air stadium, and it was the worst day, literally the worst day of rain of all year in Germany, in Hamburg. It was like raining sheets, and it was the wettest I've ever been. And then the last one was Eddie and I were sitting next to each other at the Joshua Vladimir fight at Wembley Stadium. And when Vladimir knocked Joshua down, he looked at me and said, well, at least we have the rematch. He didn't think Joshua was getting up, but then, AJ got up, pulled it out, and then knocked out, was able to stop Vladimir. So those were like three really kind of bizarre events, but they were, that's what makes the sport as interesting as it is.
Nice background, Eric.
You.
It looks like he's gonna eat you.
Go back. Let me take a picture.
That's too funny.
A little behind. Yeah.
There you go.
Well, that's one of the strangest things in boxing. I just want to thank you, all of you. Time, it's we don't have any more time. I would like to stay with you for a couple of hours, but we have to
Thank
wrap
you.
it up. Carl, anything you want to say before?
No, it's just good to hear and see everybody under these circumstances. Lou and I live in New York and New Jersey, and we're literally in the epicenter of it right now. And prayers and thoughts to everybody else out there, and you know, stay safe, and we'll talk and see everybody soon.
Thanks, Carl. Lou.
Just cheers, everybody. I actually it was the most fun I've had in the last, so it was good.
Exactly.
Stay
Yeah.
safe. Hope to see you soon.
Thank you, Eddie.
Just the same, really. I think it's I think everybody on this phone call has screamed and shouted at each other, probably at some point in the past. And I think it's nice to get on and realise that you know what's important in life, and realise that deep down we all share the same passion. You know,
Yeah, more important things for sure. Yep.
on one day, you know, we'll probably all look back as and class everybody as friends. So stay safe. Great to see you all. No doubt those arguments will be back after the summer. But until then, farewell.
Thank you, Eddie. Tom.
Thanks, guys.
Well, it's great seeing everyone. Great to connect. You know, this is almost like getting outside. You got to stay at home and be safe. But wishing everyone the best. Looking forward to seeing everyone in person again and making the best out of the situation. My house has never been so clean since I bought it. So.
Thank you, Eric.
Yeah, no, same here, same sentiment, guys. Good to see you guys. Nice distraction from all this craziness, and continue to stay safe. Don't stay at home. Don't get in a car. Carl.
Don't text and drive.
If I told you where I was going, you wouldn't believe it, so I won't even tell you. See
Okay.
this guy back here? He's got to go for an appointment, the dog, and it's the last appointment, and obviously he rules the house. So
Stay safe, guys. Stay safe.
stay away,
Thank you,
man.
Eric. Mauricio.
Okay.
Where's your phone, Carl?
It's, you don't want to know.
Bad angle, Carl.
God bless. Just beautiful to see your faces, talk to you, and I cannot wait to see you. Give you a big hug and have a nice time together. Thank you.
Thank you for
Yeah.
putting this together.
Thanks, guys.
Mauricio.
Thanks,
Yeah,
everybody.
bye.
That's round 12. WBC Talks. Stay home, stay safe. Thanks for joining us. Goodbye.
Cheers.